The following individual on our rundown seems like she was vying for unusual focuses. Number 35. Alicia Fight. Alicia Fight generally had an ability for getting on some unacceptable side of the law. She'd previously been captured for scratching vehicles, visa misrepresentation, and even attack yet, in 2003. She took a stab at her least secure wrongdoing at this point when it was declared that the fortunate Uber Millions ticket holder had won $162 million. Bonanza Alicia saw an opportunity to get rich. She realized she'd bought a terrible ticket from the very store that sold the triumphant ticket when no champs approached to guarantee their award. Alicia ventured forward to tell the world she'd won. Yet she said she unfortunately lost her ticket. Individuals from everywhere participated to attempt to help her while she recorded a police report on a serious mix-up. The genuine victors were absolutely getting monetary exhortation prior to approaching to guarantee their award. They at long last shown up to guarantee their award, unwittingly uncovering Alicia's lie. Simultaneously, as opposed to being a multi-mogul, all Alicia got was one more brush with the law for presenting a phony police report. How could she assume she planned to pull off that a similar inquiry applies? To the following individual on this rundown, number 34, Joe Antonio Quaytalk. Joe didn't score the greatest sweepstakes big stake ever yet, a $750,000 Georgia lottery prize is still really astounding. That sort of money can go far, assuming that you're an unlawful worker like Joe. Stand by. Imagine a scenario where you're considering the way in which unlawful settlers can guarantee lottery prizes. There's a straightforward response: they can't. So it's moronic to play the lottery, in any case. Yet, I surmise Joe thought he had it sorted out. He just requested that his manager gather the cash for him anyway. Joe Hayden depended on his supervisor simply taking the cash for himself. Yet there's very little you can do about that on the off chance that you've won cash wrongfully in a nation. You shouldn't be, and Joe didn't see it that way. He lashed out, he chose to sue his chief, and that was his last colossal misstep. Clearly, his unlawful status was found thanks to the preliminary, and he wasn't ousted. He wound up in prison since he'd likewise found opportunity to take steps to kill his supervisor's family after he took the cash. I know it's practically amazing, the number of slip-ups, Joe, that ensured certain individuals get truly fortunate, yet no one's at any point got that fortunate, aside from perhaps for number 33, Evelyn Baser. Not very many individuals are sufficiently fortunate to score that sweepstakes, not once yet, 2 times. That is precisely exact thing happened to Evelyn Baser. Her most memorable success in 1985 was the large greatest bonanza with a gigantic complete of $3.9 million. Yet the subsequent bonanza sure wasn't little either. Only 4 months after the fact, she had one more $1.4 million bonanza to her name. That is the sort of cash that can save you in extravagance until the end of your life. Yet, despite the fact that Evelyn was plainly really fortunate, she didn't have the smarts to go with it. She offered heaps of her money, yet surprisingly more dreadful. She burned through the vast majority of the lay on betting. I surmise she figured betting on the lottery had paid off so well, and it was her smartest choice to get more money, yet we might have told her she'd at absolutely no point ever get that fortunate in the future. She's penniless, maintaining 2 sources of income to pay for food and residing in a trailer leave. She actually plays the lottery, however. Who knows, perhaps she's 3rd time fortunate. There's one error that Evelyn didn't make: her ticket buys were all genuine. Who knows, perhaps she's 3rd time fortunate. There's one error that Evelyn didn't make: her ticket buys were all genuine. That is not valid for our next champ, number 32, Christina Goodnow. Christina Goodnow was adequately fortunate to win $1 million on an Oregon lottery scratch-off ticket. Astounding, right? It would have been astonishing, yet in a mind-boggling demonstration of idiocy. She concluded it was fine to purchase the ticket with a MasterCard, having a place with her sweetheart's dead mother. Clearly, purchasing lottery tickets with taken visas is unlawful. The same way purchasing anything with a taken charge card is unlawful. Yet that wasn't Christina's just mix-up. Clearly, the second she got the money, the federal authorities acknowledged they ought to presumably investigate why. This lottery ticket was obviously purchased by a dead lady. And when they found Christina, they concealed their own sort of bonanza. They found an entire assortment of wrongdoing she was perpetrating. She was accused of burglary, falsification, data fraud, PC extortion, and parole infringement. They even found a pleasant amount of meth in her control as the cherry on top of her violations. I surmise she merited everything on the off chance that she wasn't even sufficiently brilliant to conceal the medications when the federal authorities came thumping. It's practically okay to accomplish something that insane when you're just paying special attention to yourself. Yet the following individual on our rundown had children to care for, number 31. Gerald Miswagen, Canadian. Gerald Miswagen purchased a $2 lotto ticket that made him a moment tycoon in 2011. He won a $10 million big stake, yet blew through it in only a couple of brief years. He purchased a house that served as a daily party spot, facilitating his steadily developing injury, holders on. He likewise spent the money on vehicles, celebrating, and gifts while piling up a line of legitimate entrapments. By and by, he was doing physical work on a homestead to help his sweetheart and 6 small kids. 7 years after his huge win, he draped himself in his folks' carport. There were a great deal of grievous lottery champs out there. You can put it on the lottery revile that got to the following individual on our rundown as well. Number 30. Amanda Clayton. Amanda Clayton was going through a quite unpleasant time in her life. She was exclusively in her mid-20s, and she had to guarantee state government assistance and utilized food stamps to have the option to eat. It wasn't doing great until something astonishing happened. She won $1 million on the Michigan Lottery's Make Me Rich game. That is a sizable amount of cash to turn her life around totally. However, rather, she decided to accomplish something ridiculously dumb. A neighborhood media source saw she was all the while asserting government assistance advantages and food 2 or 3 years subsequent to winning. She hadn't gone belly up or anything, she simply needed to have it both ways. It wasn't some time before she was losing a case in court. She got 9 months probation and a fine for her violations. Tragically, she was found dead of a medication glut. A year after the fact, it's a miserable closure. Yet the following individual on our rundown demonstrates numerous victors make their own concerns. Number 29, Tonda Lynn Dickerson. This story began in a Waffle House. The gathering of servers who worked there had become very close throughout the long term. One of their customary clients began tipping them with lottery tickets on one condition: they'd part the award cash, assuming they won, and furthermore get him another truck. They never suspected they'd win. Yeah, they were off base. One of the servers checked her ticket the following day and acknowledged it was valued at $10 million. There was only one issue. Tonda was the holder of the triumphant ticket, and she concluded she would have rather not shared. Clearly, different servers were really troubled about that. Not just had they missed out on the entirety of their cash, yet they'd likewise been double-crossed by somebody they believed was their companion. So they got together and sued Honda. Sadly, they lost the case, and Tana pulled off all the money. By then, the client who purchased the ticket heard what she'd done. He was unable to accept. She'd treat her companions that way and pull off it. So he attempted to get some equity for the servers. He sued Tonda, saying the server had vowed to get him another truck on the off chance that they'd need the case. Went the whole way to high court. Tonda at last won again. She almost pulled off it. However, at that point, she goofed. Tanda chose to safeguard her cash by opening an enterprise that would have been protected, with the exception of then she gifted portions of the enterprise to her family. That was a serious mix-up in light of the fact that she didn't understand those offers equipped for gift charge. The IRS came after her when they'd understood the duty hadn't been paid, and she had to surrender $1 million. So none of her companions got to share the cash. Yet essentially she needed to pay something. Basically, Hana attempted to cling to her cash. That is the main beneficial point. Number 28, Sharon Tirabassi. Sharon Tirabassi won $10.5 million in a Lotto Very 7 Bonanza in Canada in 2004. Unreasonable going through and giving her time on Earth a beyond preposterous makeover in the years after she won depleted the cash, rapidly expecting the cash was unlimited. The excursions, vehicles, houses, and presents stacked up until nothing remained. By 2013, she was riding a transport to the temporary work. She attempted to help her kids since every one of her rewards were gone by. Then you'd think as a mother she would be wise to needs. I feel that is a bizarre way for a parent to act. Hold on until you find out about the following champs on US list. Number 27, Laura and Roger Griffiths. The marriage of Laura and Roger Griffiths finished in separate under 10 years after the English couple scored a $2.19 million sweepstakes big stake. Roger sought after his demigod dreams by burning through enormous amounts of cash to have his band discharge a collection. Laura got comfortable with the lap of luxury after the couple bought fascinating vehicles, a 1,000 and embellishments, and an exorbitant tuition-based school for their girl. They put a huge number of dollars in opening a salon where Laura was subsequently compelled to fill in as a representative just to earn a living wage. In the end, the couple had under $10 in a broke relationship. When we said you must follow your fantasies, that is not what we implied the champ coming up as of now had his fantasies materialize. He actually blew it. Number 26. Daniel Carley, Canadian. Daniel Carley got a truly epic shock one day when he scratched off his Ontario lottery ticket and acknowledged he truly won. And it wasn't only a tad chomped either. His bonanza was 5 million Canadian dollars, or around 4.4 million in US cash. It must feel unimaginable. His life was essentially amazing. Now he was locked into the mother of his unborn kid, encompassed by loved ones. And in the prime of his life that evening, he headed toward the bar. He co-claimed with his father to praise his success with France there. Could be no more excellent method for commending than with a gigantic party yet. Despite the fact that the night finished, the party didn't stop for Daniel. He moved it along for 10 years. He gauges he spent a marvelous 1 million on drugs over the course of the following couple of years. When he wound up in a tight spot financially, he again figured drugs were the response. So he began dealing opiates. He was ultimately gotten and put in a couple of years in jail for it, yet on the brilliant side, it assisted him with getting off the mixed drink of medications he was on. You realize things have turned out badly when jail time ends up being something worth being thankful. Still, it might have been more terrible. Ask the following. Victor number 25, Alex Toth. Alex Toth won 13 million in the Florida lottery in 1990. He lived well for a couple of years. Then, at that point, became penniless by burning through all the cash and not contributing accurately. After he lost everything, he split up with his better half, caused problems for documenting misleading expense forms, and invested some energy in a psychological foundation. He passed on poor at age 60 out of 2008. Certain individuals took in the most difficult way possible. That cash is not so natural to deal with. The following champ on our rundown assumed that. Up pleasantly, number 24, Ken Proxmire. You realize how individuals generally say you ought to pick annuity installments to try not to become penniless. It doesn't necessarily help. Ken Proxmire won his $1 million big stake thanks to the Michigan State Lottery. And that truly was a ton of money. Back in 1977, he picked the annuity choice, which promised him $50,000 every year for quite some time. That was a ton of money in those days. Yet not exactly however much Ken thought it was. He begun spending like he was becoming unpopular. He purchased houses, organizations, vehicles, and he was in any event covering the check at whatever point he went out with companions. Yet it didn't take long for his ventures to begin falling. Soon his pool parlor was, which makes that 50,000 out seem to be little change. His recommendation to future lottery victors: creep into an opening and pull the top end. I don't imagine that is what I needed to hear on the off chance that completely mature grown-ups can demolish their possibilities like that. What happens when a team scores that sweepstakes? We should ask number 23. Collie Rogers. Back in 2003, Collie Rogers was residing in a childcare and working at a store. Then she unexpectedly stood out as truly newsworthy when she turned into the world's most youthful ever lottery champ. She was just 16 at that point, yet she currently had an unbelievable 2.3 million in the bank. The English group completely transformed herself with that cash. Unfortunately not positively. She began turning it on insane stuff with no good examples to help her use sound judgment. She additionally fostered a medication propensity and unusual way of life, and she became discouraged. Driven her to burn through lots of money on plastic medical procedure with expectations of having a superior outlook on herself. Yet it didn't help. She said the cash caused her to feel like no one thought often about her, since she would purchase drinks for individuals in bars who were just conversing with her so they can get a story they can offer to the sensationalist newspapers. She lost each penny she'd won eventually, and presently missions to attempt to change the base age for lottery players. Clearly, Callie isn't the most popular high school lottery victor. That value goes to number 22, Michael Carroll. At the youthful period of only 9. English high schooler Michael Carroll scored that sweepstakes. He gathered the 14 million with a police lower leg wristband still around his leg that presumably provides you with a smart thought of what occurred next. He spent fiercely purchasing a house he could have done without, and spending significantly more on setting it up. He fabricated a destruction derby racetrack in the back nursery where he'd obliterate extravagance vehicles. He even began the day with opiates and vodka for breakfast. And he burned through millions on sex parties in the chateau. Despite the fact that he had a spouse and kids, soon his loved ones had left him since he was acting so seriously. Fortunately for him, when he went belly up, his significant other chose to show compassion for him. And she returned, considering he said he'd be dead at this point, assuming he actually had the cash. Do you think this is simply misfortune? Well, the following individual won on Friday the 13th, so he could have the response. Number 21. Lou Eisenberg. Lou Eisenberg turned out to be New York's most fortunate man when he handled the $5 million bonanza back in 1981. At the time, it was the biggest lottery payout ever in the province of New York. His life ought to have been amazing. After that, Yet perhaps winning on Friday the 13th reviled his new fortune, since it certainly didn't assist much, as opposed to making cunning ventures for following a fantasy. Lou bet away the majority of his money. The rest went to taking care of his exes, and that was all that Lou's fortune gave him last anybody checked. He was residing in a trailer. Perhaps it wasn't the scourge of Friday the 13th that got to him. It may very well be dated idiocy. Okay, so perhaps it's not misfortune after every one of certain individuals can lose everything. Regardless, return like number 20. Curtis Sharp. Curtis Sharp won $5 million in the New York lottery in 1982. Sadly, his story was one of the poverty to newfound wealth, and back once more. From outings to the gambling club, foolish spending on sports vehicles, and pampering gifts on companions and family members, Curtis saw his fortune vanish. Quick forward to the present time, and Curtis is a clergyman in Tennessee. As indicated by him, different champs sought to leave and get their heads prior to turning any free from their rewards. That is a quite certain story considering he lost his rewards. So we've ensured the following story on our rundown is quite possibly of just terrible. William Bud Post III, won $16.2 million in the Pennsylvania lottery in 1988. He thought his concerns were tackled, yet it wasn't well before he'd blown it. Despite the fact that William didn't have a pilot's permit, he chose to buy a plane. He attempted to assist his kin with beginning a cafe and a pre-owned vehicle business. His previous sweetheart, who was likewise his landlord, sued him for 33% of his rewards. He didn't pay her, so an adjudicator tosses his resources. The associations with his relatives additionally turned sour. William even cases one of his siblings attempted to enlist a professional killer to kill him. It doesn't deteriorate then that one day a repo man attempted to remove William's vehicle idiotically. When William saw him, he started shooting you. Will not be shocked to hear he wound up in prison for it. In the end, he lived off government-backed retirement handicap installments until he passed on at age 66. Certain individuals simply don't have the foggiest idea how to snatch an open door. Ask number 18, John Roberts. John Roberts was residing in government lodging in Scotland in 1998 when he unexpectedly won a colossal bonanza. He out of nowhere had 3.11 million English pounds in the bank, or around 5.1 million bucks. That is a mind-boggling measure of cash for anybody, yet it's significantly more on the off chance that you've never had any cash. Envision how he might have managed it. And when I say envision, I mean it, since he did nothing aside from spend it all. He blew his fortune on supercars and Goliath manors. Several individuals he believed were his companions took his money by lying about ventures. He had nothing left it just a brief time before he was residing in an old manufactured home. Sure, his companions took off with the remainder of his money. Yet, he didn't genuinely attempt to do anything great with it. The following individual somewhat did in the stupidest way that could be available. Number 17, Lisa Arcand. Lisa was the victor of a $1 million lottery prize in Massachusetts in 2004. She, like past victors, bought a home and got away. She tossed a luxurious supper for 20 of her loved ones, requesting numerous containers of wine for $200 every. She put her child in an extravagant school and purchased costly furniture for her home. Lisa chose to open an eatery as a kind of revenue in the wake of understanding that $1,000 didn't go exceptionally far. After charges, Lisa had no earlier CAF or monetary administration experience. Tragically, the CAF didn't perform well, and she had to close it. Lisa's cash was gone by 2007, scarcely 3 years after she scored that sweepstakes. They express stick to what you know, and Lisa validates that as the following individual on the rundown adhered to her thoughts excessively much. However, number 16. Janet Lee, South Korean worker. Janet Lee won $18 million in the Illinois lottery in 1993, 8 years some other time when she petitioned for financial protection. She had under $700 in the bank and $2.5 million in the red. Her gifts were benevolent. However, she essentially gave an excess of. She gave significant totals to instructive political and social causes, yet it wasn't simply give to good cause that ate through her rewards, in spite of the fact that her betting propensity supposedly set her back multiple $100,000 each year. Still, she accomplished more on magnanimous and political gifts. Her liberality incorporated $1 million for Washington College to construct another library in 2001. Her fortune had dissipated, yet, at any rate, a few others profited from. It's great to be liberal, yet perhaps not that much. The following victor was liberal. Also, with the exception of it, was a complete mishap. Number 15. John McGinnis took in the most difficult way possible that relying on your instinct isn't generally the smartest thought. The UK man scored a gigantic UK public sweepstakes bonanza in 1997, bringing back home 10 million English pounds or 16.3 million bucks. And he knew precisely exact thing he needed to do with that money. He quit his place of employment as a clinic watchman and purchased his #1 football club for 4.9 million. Sadly, he didn't realize that purchasing the club implied he'd be liable for every one of their obligations, and they sure owed a great deal of money by 2009. Only 12 years after the fact, the club's obligations had cleared out his rewards, and he was figuring coins out to purchase food. Assuming you gained anything from that story, you ought to continuously investigate as needs be. One more illustration for lottery victors is to never trust anybody. Simply ask number 14. Marva Wilson. Marva Wilson won $2 million in the Missouri lottery in 2012. Dealing with that sort of money is difficult. Fortunately, Freya Pearson, an old buddy, consented to assist Marva with dealing with her cash and do every one of her duties. However, she was lying. She tricked Marva into giving up $400,000 of her rewards into a financial balance set up by Pearson, as well as giving her admittance to Wilson's other ledger. Pearson went on a spending binge, voyaging, betting, and buying vehicles and a condo with Marva's cash. Fortunately, she was in the end nothing. Pearson was indicted and allowed a 5-year sentence by virtue of extortion, tax avoidance, and tax evasion, yet recuperating the funds was past the point of no return. All Pearson had wasted Wilson's cash in under 2 years. It's generally miserable when a lottery champ has their money taken. However, what might be said about when lottery victors are taking money from others? Number 13. James Hayes functioned as a short-term safety officer in 1998 when he won $19 million playing California's Super Lotto game. Yet he immediately went from victor to failure. His ex apparently took around 50% of the big stake cash. James fostered a heroin propensity, costing him $1,000 every week. He then, at that point, depended on ransacking banks to keep up his way of life. The FBI nicknamed him the PT Cruiser Scoundrel and the Seasoned Desperado in view of his vehicle and silver hair. In 2018, James confessed to bank theft and was condemned to 33 months in jail. Obviously, at that point, there was not $1 left of his rewards. Story on our rundown? You will feel like the banks absolutely merit what James did, regardless of whether legitimately we can't help contradicting thought number 12. Francisco Guerrero, you must be truly cautious who you trust while winning a major big stake. Francisco Guerrero was a bricklayer in Spain. He didn't have a lot of cash, yet he was blissful, and he even did whatever was necessary to purchase a couple of properties. In any case, he turned into a multi-tycoon short-term when he won what might be compared to $8.6 million. He'd never seen that much cash in his life, so rather than attempting to sort out how to manage it, he counted on it. He accepted the bank's recommendation and placed 40% of the cash into reserve funds for his 4 kids, and the rest was contributed. The bank let him know his cash could be protected, and the venture conveyed no dangers except for could acquire him $17 each year, which sounds great, isn't that so? Francisco never contacted the fragrance of his new fortune and decided to continue to work. Rather, he didn't reconsider the cash until he harmed his knee. He went to the bank to pull out a little aggregate for the medical procedure he wanted, yet they let him know there was no cash in his record. The bank had lost each and every dollar Francisco won on the horrible speculation they suggested. However, it was far more terrible than he naturally suspected. The venture had piled up an astounding measure of unpaid liability. Had he lost his rewards as well as he presently owed such a lot of cash, yet he'd likewise lost the properties he purchased with his well-deserved cash. The courts have requested the bank to repay a portion of the cash, yet it's off by a long shot to what Francisco had before. That may be the most shocking story of any lottery victor ever. It could try and be more lamentable than murder. Yet we'll allow you to choose number 11, Joseph and E.B. Ronacchioli. Canadian occupants Joseph and E.B. Ronacchioli were at that point lovely rich when E.B. won $5 million in a 1991 lottery. They were known as a blissful old couple to their neighbors. Notwithstanding, their alleged agreeable way of life changed when Joseph found E.B. had gone through all of their time on Earth reserve funds because of her addictions to liquor and betting. On the off chance that that wasn't sufficiently terrible, she wouldn't impart her lottery rewards to him. However, he found she offered the $5 million to a mysterious child she had with one more man prior to wedding Joseph. A couple of brief years after the fact, E.B. was viewed as oblivious in her home. A post-mortem showed that she had been poisoned. Joseph, who was a specialist, guaranteed he was really looking at her blood because of her chronic weakness. Yet investigators saw through his falsehoods and condemned him to 7 years. It's a really shocking completion of what might have been an extraordinary life that might have nearly been a Netflix show with that multitude of exciting bends in the road. However, the following champ on our rundown wasn't too distant. 10. David Lee Edwards. 5 years after David Lee Edwards, an occupant of Kentucky, won a bonanza. He was poor and needed to live in a capacity shed with his better half. He wedded a lady who was 19 years more youthful than he was. The couple wasted their fortune on extravagance things. They purchased many very good quality vehicles, a major manor, and a plane. In the initial 3 months, they had blown through $3 million. Toward the finish of the primary year, they had consumed in excess of $12 million. The couple later spiraled into illicit drug use. David kicked the bucket in 2013, totally broke at age 58 in a hospice care office. A couple of years after the fact, his significant other was captured for wounding a sweetheart. It's the ideal illustration of the lottery revile that is tragically a comfortable story with lottery champs. The following victor on our rundown didn't go close to drugs yet at the same time got himself on some unacceptable side of regulation. Number 9. Lawrence Candlish. Lawrence Candlish didn't simply blow through his millions, he really crossed paths with the law in an alternate country too. He scored a gigantic UK public sweepstakes bonanza back in 1997, and I mean tremendous. He was valued at around $9 million, that is large chunk of change to consume. However, Lawrence had an ability for losing cash. He began by spending it on sports vehicles and houses for him as well as his companions. Then he moved to Spain and put a greater amount of his money into a few dodgy ventures, yet that wasn't his greatest mix-up while partying hard in Spain. He was causing problems in a country he wasn't even in that frame of mind to gather social advantages from the UK in the event that you don't have the foggiest idea about those. Advantages are accessible to individuals without a task or cash to ensure they can in any case eat. They most certainly aren't intended to be gathered by multi-tycoons. Lawrence was in the end gotten a suspended sentence for benefits misrepresentation. Essentially, he merited what he got. The following champ on our rundown sure wasn't number 8. Baruch Khan. Baruch Khan established a laundry business in Chicago in the wake of moving to the US from India in 1989. He endeavored to make a decent life for his family. Years after the fact, he purchased a lottery ticket and was stunned to find he'd won $1 billion. He picked the single amount, which came to $424,000. After charges, he told the world he needed to utilize it to grow his business, so his children would have something important to acquire anyway. He never saw a dime. He passed on before he could gather his check. His sibling was quick to realize after he got a secretive call that a Rouge was having a respiratory failure. His resources became entangled in a fight between his significant other and stepdaughter. His sibling persuaded the police. His sibling had been killed for his lottery cash, and sure enough, a dissection showed proof of the dangerous substance cyanide in his blood. Arush's demise was proclaimed a homicide, yet police actually haven't gotten his executioner. It wasn't so much as a monster Powerball ticket. The following individual on our rundown will let you know that a portion of $1,000,000 isn't however much you think. Peter Kyle, a previous warrior, became one of the greatest bonanza victors the UK had at any point seen back in 2005. He'd played similar numbers he'd been deciding for quite a long time, and was the main victor of a big stake worth $9.8 million. And on the off chance that that wasn't sufficient, he went out to play bingo with his companions to celebrate and won an additional £500 as a little something extra. Yet only 3 years after the fact, he was living off benefits and remaining in a space for 18 every evening. So what befell the large numbers? There's a basic response: he spent it. Yes, every last bit of it. A fishing boat started off the crossing binge, yet soon extravagance vehicles and 5-room manors were being added to his costs. He was spending an incredible $500 every day. After that, it just took a couple of terrible ventures to take his life as a rich individual. When he won, he said in a meeting, "All that I see I can manage the cost of." Seems as though he was off base. The following individual in our rundown won threefold the amount of as Peter, who brought in his cash. Go any further. Billy Sway Harold Jr. Billy Sway Harold Jr. is a notable victor of the lottery reveal. He hit the Texas lottery bonanza in 1997, however consumed his $31 million in only 2 years. The significantly strict family gave intensely to their congregation as individual gathering individuals. Yet his costs and spending were not all gifts. He and his better half purchased several houses and costly vehicles for them as well as their relatives. They paid for expensive excursions to Hawaii and carried on with the absolute most extravagant way of life. His unreasonable spending immediately evaporated. Not long after the cash was gone, Billy's marriage. Thanks for watching Gossip Now.